Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving women leaders, and we talk about leadership purpose and its importance for you. I am a college professor, and when I am not doing that, I am speaking, writing, coaching, mentoring, and teaching high-achieving women leaders how to find, and not only find, but how to stay in alignment with their leadership purpose so they can make a meaningful difference right there in their career, leadership, or business. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I say it all the time, but I really appreciate that you take time out of your busy day to listen in and to spend your time with the podcast and our guest. And today I'm going to be talking to Cassa Grant. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Cassa. Cassa Grant is the creator of Wonderbrand and Wonderleader, the coaching program that helps you show up as the kind of leader you'd want to follow. She helps her clients communicate better, get more buy-in, and feel really great about how they're spending their time in their business. They become confident leaders with unstoppable influence, unbeatable stories, and powerful personal brands. And they get to hear about her time traveling the world and working in Antarctica. Her techniques mix brand and storytelling strategy, performance coaching, and subconscious mindset work to help transform her clients. Cassa is a certified NeuroLinguistic Programming practitioner, life and business coach. Welcome, Cassa Grant.
Thank you so much, Robin. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so first, tell us, we heard that, your bio, that we just read that, everybody just heard that. But in your own words, tell us a little bit more first about who you are and then about the work you do.
Well, I would describe myself as an offbeat leader. That's part of why I kind of focus on helping people who would also identify as offbeat leaders. And when I think about an offbeat leader, I think about somebody who maybe had a slightly different path towards leadership. A lot of my management experience was in Antarctica in a larger kind of hierarchical structure was in Antarctica. So, that's kind of, it's a little bit weird. We're just different for some people, right? But to be fair, the people are the same anywhere in the world, right? So in terms of how we act and what we want and how we respond to things. So basically, when I think about how my journey has gone from, I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to explore things, but I also always really saw the potential in when you're a great leader, how you can make other people's lives better and your own life too, frankly. There is selfishness around, training people well so that your life is much, much easier, right? So that for me has been a really important part of my journey as thinking about how I can fit into the world and help people in that way. And those stories that I have from being, I was also an adventure travel bus driver throughout the US and Mexico and Canada for on and off for years and lived overseas. I've been to all 7 continents. So, that has helped me bring kinds of different types of stories to, the themes are still universal, but bring in like, oh, that's how I was in Thailand and this happened or whatever. And that can be a really helpful way for me to connect with people. And also I see more and more people who, especially with the pandemic and the Great Reset or whatever, Great Resignation, whatever you want to call it, more and more people going, you know what, actually, I need to start figuring out what I really want to do with my limited time here on Earth. And that has always been something that was really important to me from a very early age. So for various reasons, one of which being my father got his kidneys failed when he was 35. And so I was 12 when this happened. And it really did impress me that you don't have time to mess around with just a default life, so that's a big part of how I've chosen to do things too. And so now I can help my clients do that by understanding who they are, where they're headed, what's important to them, especially as a leader. This is where I love what you're doing with your podcast is like, what's your purpose as a leader and what's your purpose as a human, because if you don't understand those, life just feels empty or it just feels kind of like, what's the point? Why am I doing all this stuff if there's no real purpose, right? Yeah. I think that was a really roundabout way of answering that question, but I hope that was.
Yes, you did. You did answer the question. Okay, it sounds like you've been doing some fascinating work. Tell us what you enjoy most about your work and then say why.
Yes. Oh, that's a great one. I love seeing people transform. It is amazing. They think they're one thing, they do some work, they start to reflect, they start to make some changes and do that action that's going to bring them towards where they need to be. And then we do the reflection and they can really see the progress that they've made. And I love helping people see, like, here's where we started, here's where we are now. It's just so satisfying and rewarding to me. And even if it's not necessarily as far as they had hoped or I don't know, whatever expected, just that feeling of like, it's done. We did it.
Yeah.
Now it's the next thing. I love that. That feels really, really great and really accomplishment for me feels awesome. And I think part of the reason why that is for me is that I've always, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily goal oriented, but I think it's really important to make sure that you celebrate your wins, that you make sure that you are having that time for self-reflection, because otherwise you just keep getting hit with, I mean, I would call them trials or, challenging circumstances. But if you don't reflect on those, you don't grow. So, having that process of understanding where you're headed, doing the things, getting that growth, and then reflecting on what worked, what didn't, how to improve, is how to grow as humans. And that's really the thing that I think is the most important. I mean, that's what I think the point of all of this is to continue to grow yourself as a person. And that can be through any number of ways, like through leadership, through entrepreneurship, through studying something that you're passionate about. Yeah. So.
Yes, that personal growth and reflection is so important. It's something that, has been a guide in my own life for years, this idea of constantly and continually reflecting and growing. So that's great that you get to do that. And I would imagine it is very, very satisfying to see the transformation.
It is.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So it sounds like you've been doing this work for a while now and you've seen these transformations. And given what you've seen, give us a little bit of advice or a helpful hint to whoever may be listening right now.
Mm.
But the podcast in general, when I created the podcast, I thought, there are a lot of high achieving women out here, and they are the ones who are always supporting others. But who supports them? How
Mm.
much support do they get? So I
Mhm.
started the podcast to give them some support, and having experts come on like you, whatever area you're from your own expertise, you have something to offer them. So I thought while they're out, wherever they are listening, whether they're walking at the gym or whatever they're doing, they can take one piece of wisdom away each episode. And so
Mhm.
those are the people who are listening. And what I mean by high achieving women, just women who are professional, goal oriented, they have ambition
Mhm.
and they are doing all the things. So what
Yeah.
would you say, what's from your experience and maybe your travels or your perspective from your travels, what's some advice you would give to them?
I mean, this is probably one that they hear a lot, but I would say, but getting in and doing the thing, I mean, actually, I just read a poll on LinkedIn about this the other day of like, what do you think stops people from getting in and doing a thing, right? And it is generally, it's, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, all of these kind of, monsters under the bed that haunt, especially tend to haunt high achieving women in particular, right? So, clearly you want a little bit of direction, but I also would say that clarity comes from doing something. And so the more you can just get it down into the smallest chunk possible and push yourself a little bit with that smallest chunk, it just keeps building on itself. And that's where I see people, they build things up in their head of like, well, I'll post on LinkedIn when I know exactly how to do it or whatever. I mean, it turns into this big thing and it's like, just do one thing. Just start doing one thing. You start to become more competent, which then makes you more confident. And so just putting that one foot in front of the other, I think is really important. And that's something that I've had to learn of like not overthinking, because I definitely have had problems with overthinking and catastrophizing maybe or whatever, and thinking way off in the future. And it's like, no, if you just get started and you just do the one little thing, then it does start to breed it on itself. And I think that I see that with a lot of my clients of like, they know that there's something that they need to do. They know that there's maybe an issue or a problem that they're struggling with, but then they don't know how to get started. So that's the other thing. They feel like I have to know where to start. And it's like, take your best guess. Or the other question I asked them too is if you were a friend telling someone what to do, this is a classic coaching question, where would you say to start? And that can help people remove themselves from that anxiety part of the equation so that they can actually think about, okay, well, this is where I could start. And this tiny little step, make it really small. That Mini Habits book, or the Tiny Habits, I think it's called, is such a good book around 5 minutes. Just trick your, because I have the laziest brain in the world. Like my brain is like, I'm not doing that, So the more I can trick it to just do a little bitty thing, the more I can. And then you start to see the success of it. Like, so for example, posting on LinkedIn, building a personal brand. I got really intentional about doing that every day for a month last year, and then 3 days a week, every single time. And it's like, it doesn't even matter if how great the views are, how great the engagement is. What matters is that I'm showing up for myself, and that I'm showing up. And now, I mean, people are always saying things to me like, I really like your posts, or, that kind of thing. And you kind of forget that other people are seeing it, because you just get so used to doing the thing instead of getting caught up in how perfect is this post, or what are people going to think of me if they read this, right? Building that muscle of practice.
Yes, yes, of getting started. I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
It reminds me something that my brother used to say. He had passed away a few years ago, but I often keep his wisdom with me. And, sometimes I would be talking to him about one thing or another, and it usually was related to some goal or something that I was trying. And he said, don't make it bigger than what it is.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I had to remind myself periodically, don't make it bigger than what it is, which will allow me to make that step that you're talking about.
And the way that you just said the word remind makes me think of like you had to reset your mind, which is a beautiful way of like, okay, I'm just reminding and redoing this so that I'm thinking of it in the way that's more intentional. And I really like that.
Yes, reminding. I love that. I love that. As you know, my own work has to do with leadership purpose, and we talked about that a little bit already. So, when you hear the term leadership purpose, what comes to your mind?
I mean, for me, I think purpose in general is really important. It's also about, so Simon Sinek does some great work on Start With Why, right? Like that is such a beautiful piece of work. And they also have a book called How Find Your Why. And I use a similar exercise with my clients where we do focus on the stories that define your identity, and then your identity leads to that purpose, right? And then the purpose needs to be like this real exciting spark. You're like, ooh, I like that. So when we find that for clients, they're just like, oh, this is exciting. Like it feels really exciting. And then they can also see that they have been doing it for years, right? So with leadership purpose, I think it's similar. Like it needs to feel exciting. Like not every single thing about leadership is going to feel exciting. And sometimes with excitement, I mean, basically fear is excitement without breathing deeply. I've heard people say, like, when you're afraid of saying the hard thing on, if you're making an announcement to a group, or holding someone accountable for, work that's maybe not as good as it could be, or whatever, that is not exciting. But when you think about what that's going to do for them in the bigger picture, it can be very exciting because you have that purpose in mind, and you're thinking about like, so my purpose is to help transform people from who they think they are to who they really are. And that is so exciting to me, even when I have to have the hard conversations to help them in what I believe will be that transformation. So yeah, having that clarity around the purpose as a leader, generally speaking, it will be around something along the lines of I'm helping somebody become a better person. Not for everyone, of course, but that to me is just so motivating, and it helps you really tap into the higher values that you have as a human, so that you can make those harder calls sometimes, or you can do the things that are harder and have that inner strength. So, I mean, that's where, purpose is so important across the board, because it just gets people through the harder times and also keeps them moving towards that higher vision of themselves.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So, do you think it's important to have leadership purpose then? And if so, why?
I mean, I do. I think it's really important because it's going to be the thing that sustains you through the more challenging times. Like I said, it's not all sunshine and roses being a leader. And there are going to be things that really push you emotionally. I mean, even physically, depending on what kind of leadership you're doing, there's going to be things that push you to grow and to, have uncomfortable conversations. I mean, conflict, for example, is one of the biggest avoidance is one of the biggest career killers I see, because people are really afraid to have conflict in a way that's healthy, meaningful, and proactive rather than reactive, right? Like they think I have to be aggressive rather than assertive. And that's not what conflict is about. Conflict is about communication of two different ideas, literally, but we build it up in our minds as what all this meaning behind it. And it's like, that's not what's going on. Like the meaning is I need to share my perspective so that we can move forward together. And I want to listen to your perspective so that we can move forward together. So yeah, I mean, having that purpose is the thing that's going to keep you aligned with where you need to be going and what you need to be doing to get there so that you can get through those challenging times and learn from them, right? Like I said before, without reflection, it's hard to learn. And without that purpose, it's really hard to see the point in all of the things, right? And how to make it better too. That's the other thing. The purpose will lead to the vision, which then leads to creating better systems and outcomes, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It does. It does give perspective. This time is going by so fast. We're coming to the end of our episode. But before we let people know how they can be in touch with you, is there anything else you want to leave with people that maybe I didn't get a chance to ask you, or something on your mind that you want to share before we head off?
I mean, I guess, yeah, the thing that I think about too is especially when imposter syndrome comes up, is thinking about, how the differences in our backgrounds actually really enrich us as leaders. So that's part of, like I said, the offbeat leader thing. It's like when I think about some of the stories that I have and I'm like, who's going to care about that? Like, or whatever, right? It doesn't matter because the theme of the story is what matters, right? And so as a leader, sometimes we can think, well, I didn't go to the best school, or I didn't get an MBA, or I didn't do this, and this, or maybe I took time out from work to raise my family. There's all kinds of stories that we can have around what might limit us from our personal stories, but they're actually really a strong place to lead from. And so I really like to emphasize that for my clients, especially if we're working on branding or, business storytelling and that kind of thing, because that is a place where people can connect with you. And once they connect with you, it's much easier for them to really get behind. That's how you get buy-in, right? Like they can get behind some of the things that you're trying to help them do. And otherwise, it's really hard to get that. So accepting, I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, you have to bring all, tell them all about, your hemorrhoids or something like that is not what I'm saying at all, to be really gross about it. But you need to, if you can bring some of these stories to work that maybe you in the past wouldn't have felt like were relevant, that's going to bring a whole picture for yourself. I remember I had a leader in Antarctica who took over the station at a very challenging time. We had a bunch of budget cuts coming from the federal level and people were freaked out. And we had this all hands meeting that was, I mean, it must have been so horrible for him. Because people were not holding back. They were just like angry, upset, worried, etc. And he was so honest with us. And he was really straightforward and just like, this is what I can answer. This is what I can't answer. This is the struggle that I had when I was in this position as well. I mean, it really helped. And I didn't necessarily agree with everything he was saying, but I really respected him as leader from then on out because he was able to give that broad richness of experience and give us real answers based on that. You built that trust. So that's something that I think that is important for people to start accepting about themselves more. And that's what helps with imposter syndrome too. And also with your personal brand is like understanding what makes you special and different and embracing that.
And allow yourself to be that offbeat leader.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I'm convinced that people who are listening right now are saying, I want to hear more. How can I hear more? So if they are saying that, how can they be in touch with you?
Well, I am big on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn and I'm very active there. I'm also on Instagram and it's Cassa, Cassa Grant. It's after a road in Wyoming. So my mom was a very creative person. Well, is. And I also, on my website, I have some downloadables that people might be interested in. One about owning your weird to be an offbeat leader. One about the 5 stories every leader needs to be able to tell. I also have one around building your personal brand. So if people are interested, they can head over to my resources section on my website, which is CassaGrant.com. But yeah, reach out on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people there. And I would love to see people from your audience there. And I'll see you there too, I'm sure.
That'd be great. Thank you for such a generous offer. And it's Cassa Grant. I said Cassa, so let me.
Oh, that's okay. No, all good. It's like I said, it's a hard one.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom and also all the generosity of the resources that you have for people. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Robin. I appreciate it.
Okay, everyone, this is the end of our episode. And if you want to hear more about me or know more about me, you can find me on my website, robinlowens.com, robinlowens.com, or you can find me on social media, Robin L. Owens, PhD, Robin L. Owens, PhD. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Robin signing off. See you next time.